Hey folks, this is Dr. Emily Sheridan with American Resiliency. I'm back from my trip to Minnesota. I learned a number of things that I found very disturbing. I'd like to talk with you about them in this informal video. I'm going to combine a lot of information, updates from the conference, which thanks to everyone on the channel for sending me there. If any of you have done academic conference travel, you know it's expensive. The trip, everything was completely paid for by donations. It means a lot that I can go up there and bring back this kind of information. Thank you so much. I'll also be sharing notes on landscape and culture related to resilience outlooks for the parts of Minnesota that I passed through. So let me tell you what happened. Let me tell you what was up with this Midwest Climate Resilience Conference. So I left on Tuesday of last week. I left from Des Moines and I was going up the 35 and was just astonished when I got over the border because, I haven't been to Minnesota in like 20 years. I got up here by Albert Lea and was shocked. I was blown away by how beautiful the landscape became. This is in an area, if we can zoom out a little bit, this whole area here is estimated to be pretty low change band, right? For anyone who's been following along. So when I crossed over and saw the species diversity like explode in this beautiful wetland over the 35, I was like, man, this is awesome. This rocks. And then I got up into the Twin Cities and I didn't take 35 East. With the way the traffic was, I took the 35 West and I was driving during like pretty bad driving conditions here. It was that sort of low visibility cloud-like rain that can be very difficult. And I was passing through Minneapolis at 3 p.m. So you're starting to get the building rush hour traffic. In terms of this city's, Minneapolis, St. Paul's resilience outlook, in an urban area, a lot of that is very dependent on the culture, on the way that people behave, the way that they handle adverse driving conditions, to me, is an excellent indicator of high resilience potential for the Twin Cities. I was very impressed at the general alertness, responsiveness, and cooperativeness of the population. So all around, I'm like, yeah, all right. And there's very healthy forest around here. This was looking awesome. This whole area was looking awesome. I would definitely, every experience I had related to the Twin Cities, recommend it. And then I keep going. I'm not going all the way to Duluth because I wanted to have a amount of time on Wednesday to go up by Two Harbors before I spoke at 1 p.m. in Duluth. So I stopped around Banning State Park and stay in a low price hotel there. And that's where things like really, I started to get like a weird feeling. I went to Casey's to, get some gas, buy some stuff. First place in the US I ever had anyone scan my 20, check and see if a 20 is counterfeit. I've had that happen a lot of times, a lot of places for 50s, for hundreds, never for a 20. I saw a number of people in my short time in this area be turned away from lack of funds at local stores. And I saw that I was in an area, I was entering a cultural zone where people don't get to have teeth, which I always feel like that's a bad sign when working class people, when regular people don't have basic dental care. And it has such an impact on the population. It's so hard to get people to interact with you in a natural way because people are ashamed to smile because of the defects in their teeth. It's very not a great sign. So I went to bed. Everyone there seemed very nice, but there is a very heavy feeling of poverty. And then the next day, here's what I did. So I woke up really early on Wednesday. I woke up, it was still dark out. That's not so hard to do this time of year, right? Especially if you're the kind of person who likes to get out and work on the land. You end up waking up when it's dark out a lot. And I was excited to be awake. I had like some ominous feeling, but I wanted to get up to Two Harbors. I hadn't been up to this area since, gosh, like 25 years. Since I was a kid, I hadn't been up in this area. I wanted to go look at rocks, look at plants, see if things were the same as I remembered. And so I start driving when it's dark. And as I'm coming into Duluth, right around here, right past Moose Lake, I have this feeling of dread. I have this feeling that there's a death on the land. And I'm like, dang, Emily, like pull your act together. What's going on? You have nerves because you're going to talk. Then I get into Duluth and I feel my terrible car, which I love. I love my terrible car. I'm going to maintain that thing until it croaks out. But I felt something give and I was like, oh, dang, I got to fix the car. So I put in a new destination. I can't go right to Two Harbors. It's still dark, but I turn and I go to Hermantown. And I'm driving to Hermantown because that's where the Walmart is. I'm like, well, this is good. I'm going to see like normal people place, right? I drive past these houses in Hermantown. I'm starting to be able to see them. I'm like, oh, cute. Normal person houses, right? Like 2 bed, 2 bath house. I have a 1 bath, 3 bedroom house that was built in the 40s, little house. Then I noticed that these houses, when I came back and looked on Zillow, they're like so expensive and not like so good, right? I'm like very disturbed by this. And at the Walmart, I can see um, poverty on people. I can see that people are not eating good food and that they haven't been able to eat a healthy diet for some years. I can see that I'm in a cultural zone where people don't get to have teeth, which is like a pretty serious, visible justice issue that changes the way people think about themselves. I'm disturbed. I'm disturbed as I come out of Hermantown. The light comes up, the sun comes up. I get my car juiced up enough. I'm like, oh, what am I going to do? Am I going to just go to the conference? Maybe I shouldn't drive another half hour away from Duluth. What if the car breaks down? But I'm like, Emily, if your car is going to break down a half hour from Duluth, have it happen now where you have lodging for a couple of nights, right? If you need a mechanic, you can get a mechanic in Duluth, you can get back home. I'm like, all right, let's go. So I go up to Two Harbors. And as the light is coming up, it's both very beautiful because the leaves are really good. The leaves are better than I think they should be. I'm like, it's the end of October. Why are no leaves down? Have they not had a heavy frost? And I noticed there are many trees that are bent like a bow, and that the density of the forest feels wrong. I go to Agate Bay Beach as a first stop in Two Harbors. And I'm walking around there, and I remember very vividly the ground cover in northern Minnesota in the North Shore area from when I was a girl and how distinctive it was. I've always been interested to look at the ground. There are a lot of mosses and other ground cover there that outcompete grass in the harsh winter conditions. But I saw a tremendous incursion of grass. And in the woods there, I saw a tremendous amount of dead trees and trees that were very heavily lichenized, trees that had a very heavy fungal incursion where the trees were not going to live. I saw very poor health. And I definitely noticed with the herbaceous plants growing that they had not had a hard frost. I still saw flowers there. Let me show you some of the flowers. Look here, holding in my hand, growing out of the ground at Two Harbors. You can see that this is a grass mixture, much more similar to my home habitat in sort of centralist Iowa than you should see on the North Shore. And this is Indian paintbrush, blooming Indian paintbrush at the end of October. You don't normally see red flowers blooming in the late fall like that anyway, right? Like it's mostly a yellow-white landscape. I have never seen Indian paintbrush flowering this late in the year or this far north. I was super creeped out. So I'm walking around, I'm exploring, I keep getting more and more creeped out by the landscape. Great place to be before I'm going to go and lead this talk, right? It's fantastic. So I'm like, let's go talk to local people. Let's go see what they think about this extremely late frost for the North Shore. Most of the local people that I talked to did not notice it or felt they had been very fortunate this year, that they had such a long summer. They were hoping for a mild winter. Appeared to be very low awareness of the level of transformation in the landscape happening around them. And not a lot of concern about fire. I didn't see like any fire safe zone logging. Like, I'm sure anyone who's listening to this from the West Coast, where the fires have already kicked off, right? That's been going for a while. Is like, like you need intensive landscape management in a forest that is dying like this. I didn't see it. I was very concerned. So I go to the conference then. I give my talk. It's great. There are other people there from the channel. I talked to 3 people, and I suspect there were more at the conference who were there from the channel. It was really cool to see everyone. A lot of people were there to learn. Here's what I learned. Most important thing, fifth national climate assessment. This is what's on everyone's mind on the channel, right? I know that I'm not alone. I'm chomping at the bit for this thing to come out. You can see timeline supposed to be finalized and published. The lead authors said it's going to be out by the end of November. They say the White House has had it through October and it hasn't been released yet. So it's being sat on for a while. It hasn't been released. They were very closed mouth about any new information. I think that myself, many other people who went there, we were hoping for maps, for metrics, for status update. They had us sit there and listen to poems and elegies to help us process our grief. Like, you don't need to go too many levels down to uncover the meaning of that. That was super disturbing. And I had a number of people at the conference talk about that we're going to be putting out nationally a 3 weeks ready framework based on Oregon's 2 weeks ready framework, where in Oregon, especially if you live in the Cascadia tsunami potential zone, if you live in that earthquake potential area, you're supposed to take precautions. You're supposed to make yourself able in your community to hang out for 2 weeks after a big disaster. There's going to be a movement nationally that your community should be ready for 3 weeks after a disaster, where you're the low priority place and you shouldn't expect help to be coming. I think you might remember in my preparing for 2024 video that I recommend a minimum level of preparation in that video to be 3 weeks ready for utility disruption. I found it very eerie to experience the same messages at this conference, which is attended mostly by federal employees and contractors. I think it's very important that we hear this message, that it does not appear there is a high level of organization that is going to come and bail you out and bail your community out, that getting ready is very important. I do not imagine that the release of the fifth national climate assessment is being slow because it contains such fantastic news. Another thing that I did not hear mentioned very often at the conference was the reality of climate observations that are coming in from the global south, from Antarctica, terrestrial observations from South America, including the tremendous droughts impacting the Amazon and drying rivers there, as well as heating them to the point where marine mammals, such as the river dolphins, are dying of heat stress. The reality that there's a cascading amount of direct observations coming in, suggesting that we must prepare now was not mentioned, as people were happy and professional and pleasant and gave each other their business cards. I went to a session on metrics, which was a cool session. It was a cool session, the session on metrics, about how we're going to be able to describe statistically if we are making progress on the climate resilience front. And I really enjoyed the data architecture elements of this presentation. At the end of the presentation, a woman asked a question, and it was one of those moments where you have to listen to what the woman is saying because she speaks through such pain. She sounded to me like she might have COPD or something, some restrictive lung condition, where she made these whooping intakes of breath between every few words of her question, which was, if we're going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2030, what are our metrics? And she did not get a good answer for that question. It's very concerning. It felt very like hanging out on the Titanic situation. Let me show you some other concrete information that maybe, if your community is ready to act, will inspire you. I think it's important to take this message. We're not going to get a lot of help from the top seriously, but that doesn't mean that we're out. Here's this. This is important. This is important to see. So this is a good place here. This is something I really want to show you, some good work by the West Central Initiative. And let me show you something. In the Minnesota forecast, in the Minnesota 2050 outlook, I talk about the fact that it looks in the data like there's 3 change bands. It was very interesting for me to see this validated at the conference, looking at total temperature change historical since 1895, looking at lows, highs, and average. We can see 3 very distinct change bands emerge in the historical data. We can see that that northern band is a high change band. This is both validating and it's always a little disturbing when you're pouring through something and then someone else finds the same pattern. It's both validating and disturbing when the pattern is not so good. Back to this West Central Initiative. Here we have participation, full involvement in climate resilience by the type of community that is often left out of the conversation. Rural, conservative, agricultural community. We see also great participation and representation in this initiative by White Earth Nation. There were many representatives from White Earth Nation at this conference. I think that it is important to acknowledge that Indigenous leaders, the tribal elders in northern Minnesota, were about the first people in the US to really get loud about the climate crisis. And it is a travesty that they continue to provide the most effective leadership when they are extremely under-resourced. It speaks to the enormous cultural power, resilience, and persistence of the Indigenous people of Minnesota. I think that this is a really important initiative here, this West Central Initiative. And they're looking for people to work on putting the plan into action. These jobs are very appealing. If you're a person who wants to be in a community that's going to make it through, I would consider this area. I would consider these jobs. The salaries are appropriate for being able to live in the area. This loan officer position is serious because they have funding and they have a plan to help people get loans of $15,000 or less, which is not a lot like on a big ag scale, but it is a lot if you're talking about moving an operation in a more resilient direction in terms of energy, in terms of landscape, or in terms of trying out new agricultural products. So if you get this job, you're going to be able to help some people in a very serious way. So I spent some more time at the conference. I'm learning some more stuff. A lot of it is like footprints and planning for initiatives that are going to take multiple years. A lot of it is assuming similar levels of stability, similar levels of timeline to what we've had over the last 5 years for these plans to be completed. There is a stark visual difference between the people who are at the conference and the people who are serving the conference, the people who are the wait staff, the people who are working in the hotel. It is very clear that this is an area with an extremely serious inequality problem, that this is an area where regular people should not have an expectation of teeth or other dignity. I'm going to take a minute and talk about why I love Iowa. In Iowa, there is not so much of a gap between rich and poor. There are plenty of us who are not so rich, right? There are plenty of people who don't have a lot of money. A lot of the kids in Iowa benefit from social services programs because the social service programs are there so that you can have teeth in Iowa. I hate it that we're moving into a future where teeth are optional and clearly, to some perspectives, not desirable. I think the impact that that has on the population, the impact that has on people psychologically as a group, the way it cuts people off from opportunity, I find it to be very insidious. So I'm in a great mood as I'm getting ready to head back down. And, I'm like already creeped out, right? I had that feeling of death coming in. I leave in the full light. I drive out of Duluth, and oh my Lord, the forest here looks terrible. The forest looks terrible coming down from Duluth on the 35. I was horrified. It is a lot of newly dead pine. that newly dead pine where the needles are dry and gold on the pine. Not a good sign. Really bad. Ugh. But I get south, hour and a half south, the landscape changes. You get back down by Minneapolis, St. Paul. Oh my goodness. Coming down here, coming down on this road here, this is the 52 through St. Paul. Just gorgeous. Coming out into this valley up by the headwaters of the Mississippi. Beautiful forest. Very healthy looking forest. And I'm driving back to my house, which is in the middle of nowhere. I drive through Rochester. Looking good, Rochester. You got some potential there. I drive through all these little tiny towns. I cross over into the Iowa border. There's like a lot of very aggressive signage, Cresco, trying to keep people out of Iowa. I feel like that is worth noting that there's clearly border aggression in this area. Not cool. We keep going down through Waterloo. Pretty decent landscape stability. So now I'm home. Everything that I experienced on the trip, honestly, I come away from it feeling very disturbed, with the exception of that West Central initiative, which, if you're in the area, I would strongly encourage you to find a way to participate in the West Central initiative or to talk to their organizers so that you can work on getting such an initiative operational in your area. The people working on that program are delightful. They were some of the brightest lights that I encountered in my time. I was also very excited to see many members of the American Resiliency community in and around this conference. I saw some people at the conference. I met a person also in Duluth who was not at the conference, in good part so that we could talk about these socio-cultural issues around economics and the serious concerns around these economic issues up in that northern part of Minnesota. It's very serious. You should definitely consider it if you're considering relocating to the area. It looks very grim there. And I'm sorry that this update is so grim. I I never want to lie to you. You know, I always do my best to tell the truth as well as I can. And the things that I found out on this trip, they were very grim. As we wait for the fifth National Climate Assessment to be released, I hope that the takeaway you have is that it is important to act now. As we look at all of the indicators on the global climate scale related to the strengthening El Nino cycle, you may have seen there's increased length and intensity in the prediction for this El Nino event. We know 2024 is going to be worse than 2023 has been. And there have been just a slew of terrible climate disasters impacting communities all over the world in 2023, like we have never seen before. If you're in the Midwest like I am, I would strongly advise you this holiday season to get air purifiers so that we don't have to go through the smoke events in our homes like we did this last summer, again next summer. This is a good time to respond and get ready and know that we didn't deal with a one-off, that this is going to continue. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry to give you so much bad news. Over the next few weeks, I have a lot of content that I'm going to be developing based on other things that I've learned. I have content I'm going to develop based on my recent seminar day at the University of Iowa. I was able to talk to many content experts and learn fascinating things related to the field of resilience. I'm going to develop those stories and get them to you as we wait for the fifth National Climate Assessment. It's very important. It's very important that we take the measures we can to build resilience now. Those of us particularly who are fortunate enough to live in areas that are lower change, that have good resilience potential, the work that we do for ourselves, for our communities, is crucial. It's going to be crucial over this next year. Even if climate were our only problem, even if we weren't living in a time of steadily worsening geopolitical tensions and tensions within the United States, there's a real concern. There's a real concern. There's not enough coming from the top. We're not devoting the resources that we need to handle this climate problem. So we need to get ready. And I hope that I can get you more information on where preparation is going to really matter in the future. I think these field notes indicating that very high level of change and social unrest in Minnesota, northern Minnesota, are important. I wish you all the best. I'll be back with a more formal and organized content later this week. Thanks for listening. Let's get ready. Folks, I want to thank all of you who participate, who contribute to our AR community, who keep this channel going, who get me out on the ground to help bring back what I hope is some useful information. I also want to promote that coming up on November 19th, Sunday at 2 p.m. Central, we're going to have another AR community chat. We need to not get distracted or bogged down by bad news. We need to stay focused on action. This community chat on the 19th, we're going to focus on practical resilience stories and advice. Come and share what you've been doing. Come and share your challenges. Let's see if we can make a plan. Look forward to seeing you all soon. Let's get ready.